let's cut to the chase on this Chinese business. Peter and I have talked about it a lot. Scott Morrison says we'll always stand our ground when it comes to the things we believe in and the values we uphold, but we've remained fairly silent when the editor of the Global Times, the leading Chinese Communist Party publication, described us as pieces of chewing gum on the sole of China's shoes. The Chinese ambassador in Germany has warned that German cars could be deemed unsafe by Chinese authorities unless Huawei is given the green light. We mentioned many times that Sweden has been warned of consequences if it awards a dissident Swedish-Chinese publisher a prestigious literary prize. The Chinese ambassador to Sweden told Swedish Public Radio in November, "We treat our friends with fine wine, but for our enemies we have shotguns." In the last week, the Chinese embassy in Canberra gave our Prime Minister a slapdown, saying it was a joke for Australia to claim it had been vindicated by international support for a coronavirus inquiry. But no one seems prepared to stand up to China simply for not being a good international citizen. We talk about putting all our eggs in the one basket. We talk about the Port of Darwin. We're good on talk. What about action? And even as we Australians, we are to blame. We're obsessed with buying cheap Chinese imports, which makes the situation worse. On the other hand, it's got to be said, Australia is home to more than 1 million people of Chinese heritage. They value the liberty and freedom of expression they enjoy here. Many of them have got strong family ties in China. They expect us to stand up. China's not a democracy, it's a communist regime, and its values and beliefs are fundamentally different from ours. Well, step into the ring one Drew Pavlou, an outstanding 20-year-old philosophy student at Queensland University. He's campaigned against the university's tight links with the Chinese Communist Party. He came to public attention in July last year, leading a protest in support of Hong Kong democracy activists. He was assaulted by men who gave every impression of being heavies working for the Chinese state. He was then targeted by a torrent of online hate and death threats from patriotic Chinese students. That's what they called themselves. China's Consul General in Brisbane praised the violence. That is, violence towards those supporting Hong Kong democracy, violence towards Drew Pavlou, 20 years of age. Praised the violence. Maurice Payne had something to say, but that's where it ended. Drew decided to seek a protection order against the Consul General through the courts. His safety was further threatened. China state media vilified him, which virtually gave official blessing for the thuggery to continue. He was no longer safe. How has Queensland University responded? None of the pro-Beijing students or the thugs who assaulted Drew have been disciplined. But what about this Consul General Zhu Ji? He's an adjunct professor of the university. And now, irritated by the young man's robust criticism and some undergraduate sarcasm, they decided to intimidate him into silence, or so they think. Last week he faced a disciplinary hearing. He was being disciplined for his protests and for his social media posts in which he criticised the university's ties with Chinese government institutions. He attended the hearing with his barrister Tony Morris. He walked out because the disciplinary panel, can you believe, had denied a request that Drew be allowed access to certain internal university documents sought for his defence. His QC, Tony Morris, questioned the integrity of the disciplinary process, pointing out that 2 of the 3 panellists were paid employees of the university. This is a disciplinary hearing against 20-year-old Drew Pavlou, and 2 of the 3 panellists are paid by the university. So Drew now, this brilliant and courageous 20-year-old, is going to appeal his expected expulsion from the university in the Queensland Supreme Court. Expulsion. He joins us from our Brisbane studio. Drew, good evening. Thank you for your time. Just, I think Peter and I'd like to know how you're bearing up. What is the latest?
Thanks so much, Alan, and thanks so much, Peter, for having me on. It's been very difficult lately. The university didn't just stop at trying to threaten me with expulsion. They actually threatened me with jail time last week when they directed their law firm, Clayton Utz, to send me threatening letters, threatening to prosecute me for contempt of court and to actually seek my jail time. I mean, a penalty for contempt of court in Queensland is 3 years imprisonment, and the University of Queensland, to stop me trying to use documents relevant to my defence in my expulsion hearing, actually threatened me with contempt of court and threatened to go after my solicitor, Mark Tarrant in Sydney, threatened to delist him as a solicitor. So they've actually made, threats of jail time, threats to destroy people's livelihoods. They've now, paid I was talking to Tony Morris QC, my lawyer, who obviously is an expert in the legal industry, and he believes, like, given that UQ's now contracted out 2 international law firms to deal with my expulsion, so that being Clayton Utz and Minter Ellison, because the university's contracted in 2 international law firms to make the case for my expulsion before the disciplinary hearing, it was Tony's belief that they've spent at very minimum $100,000 seeking my expulsion. And if we step back at the bigger picture, you consider the fact that they investigated me for months. They created an 186-page expulsion dossier. They had people and security following me around campus for months. You know, this is a campaign launched against a student by a public university with Australian taxpayer dollars that could be going into the hundreds of thousands of dollars now, up to, you know, $500,000 trying to expel me. And if this goes to the Supreme Court, we're talking the University of Queensland burning millions of Australian taxpayer dollars on a petty vendetta against a student because that student criticised their ties to the Chinese state, a government that's operating concentration camps on a scale not seen since the Holocaust. I simply wanted to make my voice clear that I don't want my university doing deals with this government that's drenched in blood, this dictatorship that kills innocent women and children. And because I spoke up for human rights, I believe...
Yeah, Drew, can I just jump in there? Because I just want some clarity. I mean, I'm a lot older than you, but I remember my time at Melbourne University, and there were protests. When the handover of Hong Kong occurred all those years ago, there were protests at my university, a pro-China protest in favour of the handover, a lot of protests from people who feared exactly this outcome, that it would be a loss of democracy in Hong Kong. Now, protests, you couldn't have walked to the cafeteria at Melbourne Uni in my day without a protest for this and a counter-protest for that. What is the exact charge the university has against you? That you organised a protest and that you had social media posts? Is that the charge? And give me some more detail.
So what happened, I guess, months ago was, I guess, the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Queensland, Peter Hoy, a man who's just absolutely drenched in blood money. He's absolutely steeped in blood money in his ties to the Chinese government. This man, I guess, a couple months ago, he decided that my campus protests were too sensitive because the university relies on the Chinese market for 20% of its revenue, and the Chinese government, as a totalitarian government, could decide at any time this campus is too politically sensitive to allow Chinese students to study at, therefore we will pull them out. So, you know, I guess Peter Hoy's beautiful, great ties with China that he was getting 200K bonuses each year for developing, they were threatened by one 20-year-old. I mean, that is not a very sustainable business model for a university to have 20% of its revenue threatened by a 20-year-old undergraduate student mocking the relationship, posting dumb memes on Facebook and stuff like that. And, because I threatened the universities... Yeah,
I just want to ask you there, the Consul General, who actually also attacked you and gave every impression of supporting the violence, he is an adjunct professor at the university, isn't he? He's as welcome as ever.
Yes. I mean, this is a man that is a serving official of the Chinese government. He's a serving diplomat representing the Chinese Communist Party in Queensland. He represents a government that operates concentration camps in which 1.5 million Uyghur Muslims languish. This is a man that is responsible for genocide. He's part of a genocidal government. He's been appointed as an adjunct professor to the University of Queensland. What's his background? Does he have this beautiful academic background? No, we've found out that he was just simply a police officer before joining the Communist Party back home in China and then being elevated through the ranks. So the University of Queensland, for no reason other than, you know, being sycophants to the Chinese government, appointed this man to an adjunct position. And this man, in his position as an adjunct professor at the university, actually endorsed violent attacks against me and other students. And for 11 months, the University of Queensland said nothing. It was only last week, under immense public pressure because of my case, that the Chancellor, Peter Varghese, the supposed ultra-uber diplomat who once headed DFAT, he came out saying, oh, maybe it was a little bit bad that the serving Consul General in Brisbane, a UQ professor, endorsed violent attacks against students. It took them 11 months. Why did it take them 11 months?
But I'm surprised, Drew. I just don't understand, in Australia, in Queensland, why you have lost the right to freedom of speech on a university campus. Did you sign that away when you enrolled at UQ? What's happened?
Peter, if I could just intervene there and clarify, am I right in saying, Drew, I tell you what, by the way, the first judgment that everyone watching at home has made, you're too smart for all of these people. Don't you worry, you'll finish up in front. But is it right that on April 9, the University of Queensland, via its disciplinary board, delivered a 186-page document dealing 11 charges, and you were summoned to some secret meeting, and if you couldn't explain yourself, you'd be expelled? Is this what happened April 9?
Yes. Yeah, so April 9, 186-page dossier filled with 11 allegations, and each allegation had sub-allegations, so in total 23 charges. The University of Queensland, some of this stuff went back months and months and months to last year. So they had put me, I guess, under surveillance for months. 186 pages filled with absolutely idiotic stuff like Drew used a pen in a campus shop without paying for the pen and then put the pen back on the shelf.
Well, hang on.
186 pages.
Hang on, Drew, let's take this point. I mean, the viewers at home won't believe this. As I understand it, and Drew just confirmed this, you were guilty of behaviour that the university said that, quote, unreasonably disrupted staff or students when at, and they got the exact time, there was surveillance on this young man, 12:30 p.m, quote, on or about the 26th of February 2020, you took a pen from a shelf at the university stationery shop. You wrote something with it and you put the pen back and left the shop, paying only for 3 sheets of card. What sort of Peter, this is unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah, but this goes to my point.
It's just...
This is a crime in search of a case to remove someone from the campus that they find threatens their business model. I agree with you there, Drew. But you have a right to free speech in this country. Otherwise, what did all the Anzacs die for? I find this just incomprehensible, and you're right to remind us, Peter Varghese, I remember him very much when he was the head of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade in the Abbott years. I mean, it's extraordinary that he would stand by. I know he's read the same briefings about China that I have. I am very surprised he would sit by and let this happen.
Yeah, for them it's simply money. And I guess what I was going to say is that because they only care about their back pocket, then maybe we should start hitting them in the back pocket. I think all UQ alumnus should consider refusing donating to the UQ Giving Fund. All UQ alumnus who have given to the UQ Giving Fund over the last year, they should write to the university requesting a full refund. Companies linked to the university, like Boeing, Lockheed Martin, these are companies that deal with sensitive military technology. Why would they want to be dealing with a campus? Why would they want to deal with a university that's controlled by the Chinese government? We should have total divestment.
Just on the Chinese government, I mean, our viewers at home, I'm sure, are gobsmacked. But confirm this, Drew. Is it true the Chinese government has funded, at least 4 courses at the University of Queensland, including one on China's role in strengthening responses to global security challenges such as human rights, mass atrocities, prevention and counter-terrorism? It's got a Confucius Institute and it funds 4 university courses. This is all from Chinese money. This is proving the point that you're making.
Exactly. Why would the Chinese government be funding courses on an Australian campus? They're not doing it out of charity. They're not doing it, out of love. They're doing it to spread propaganda. This one of these courses, Understanding China, funded by the Chinese government. When it comes to the week in which they're looking at the internment of 1.5 million Uyghur Muslims in concentration camps, they frame the issue exactly how the Chinese government frames the issue, as an appropriate counter-terror response. They basically parrot Chinese propaganda lines. This is happening on Australian campuses, parroting Chinese government lines.
We can talk here all night, but I just want one final question. This young man is smart, isn't he? Am I right, Drew, in saying that the university's vice-chancellor, to whom you've just referred, this Professor Peter Hoy, was until recently a senior consultant to Beijing's Global Confucius Institute headquarters Hanban and a member of its governing council, which is responsible for more than 500 Confucius Institutes operating in universities and schools across the world? Please tell me that's not true.
Yeah, it shouldn't be true. In 2019, he only resigned recently because he was informed that he would have to resign under foreign transparency laws. In 2015, he went off to Beijing to have a medallion strung around his neck by China's vice premier for his efforts, quote, promoting Confucius Institutes worldwide, read, promoting Chinese government propaganda worldwide. I mean, this guy is absolutely drenched in blood money. I wonder how he can even look himself in the eye at night. How does he even look his grandchildren in the eye, knowing he's worked for a government that operates concentration camps? He should be sacked. He should not be in charge of the University of Queensland.
Well, let me tell you, Drew, you don't need to study. You're a mile ahead of the pace. Look, we'll keep in touch with you and we'll follow your progress. And if need be, you'll be back on the program because your story has to be told. Just before we go to the break, Peter, I mean, what an impressive young man, but my God, we needn't worry about the quality of university education or any education if they turn out young people like this. But this is a staggering indictment of contemporary education in this country, isn't it?
I think it's absolutely terrifying. I would have said it's sobering, but now having heard all of that, I think it's absolutely terrifying. And the connections in relation to the VC, the Vice-Chancellor there at the end, I think is a real indictment. I mean, we have been taken for mugs. I know the rivers of gold coming out of foreign students into Australian universities have made us slovenly in a budget sense, but it's also made us very intellectually deprived. And I think this is where we've got to get some backbone, readjust the business model. And if they won't do it themselves, this has got to be something the government, Dan Tehan, hello, he's the minister, they move on this.
That's it.
They move on this.
That's it. Brilliant, brilliant comment. I was just about to make that myself, Peter. Brilliant comment by Peter. Dan Tehan, where are you? We are funding this outfit with taxpayers' money. Now, you can say to the university, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you what we'll do. While this behaviour continues, while this case against this young man continues, and until it is withdrawn, there'll be no more taxpayers' money for Queensland University. Come on, grow a pair, Dan. Grow a pair. You need it. We'll take a break.